everybody. This is Jacob Stoops, and we are back for episode 65 of the Page 2 podcast. If you don't know me, I am an SEO director with Search Discovery, a data transformation company. By the way, we also do digital marketing, paid search, SEO. So you happen to be a client out there listening, we would love to work with you. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Jeff Luella, Senior Technical SEO at The Wirecutter, a division of the New York Times.
Hey, howdy, hey.
Hey, howdy, hey.
I was going to say, that's Laser Luella now.
I was going to say, yeah.
Since I've upgraded and bought a laser to do some laser engravings.
A laser. Laser. That's me channeling Dr. Evil from Austin Powers. And actually, Jeff looks more like Dr. Evil than I do. So
I do.
So Jeff, tell us about this laser.
Oh no, it's just a small diode laser that runs on a track. It looks kind of like a 3D printer, but it's like I think a 5.5 watt diode laser that's boring, data in there. But basically, it's really good for just engraving. More high end powered ones will do like cutting through like metal and wood. Mine's not that powerful. It's kind of my intro into lasers. But as many of you know, I'm like a DIY junkie. So my wife has like a Cricut where she can cut vinyl, and I just wanted to outdo her by having lasers shoot through the whole house.
Yeah. So you've built your own axe throwing course. You have a 3D printer. You and your daughter fly drones and and she does robot videos and crushes us in terms of her number of YouTube subscribers. And now you're into lasers. And wait, also you make your own alcohol. How do you have this much time?
It's just just don't go to bed at night. You might enjoy like 8 hours of sleep, but I'm out there rocking and rolling, and I'm on a cornhole team, so I'm a professional cornhole player.
Yeah, professional. Yeah, is this
and by professional means I get $50, and for $50 I get a T-shirt and get to lose. But
I was gonna say, I was like, we're all in Ohio on lockdown. Is this what you guys do with your COVID lockdown or your lack of lockdown in Georgia?
Yeah, there's benefits of having really bad government in my state. So.
Oh my goodness. All right. So we have a really, really interesting guest today. And we were talking right before the episode, and I'm almost positive that I'm gonna butcher this, but I am sure that when she comes on, she's gonna do her own name justice in terms of the proper pronunciation. But today, straight from Tech SEO Women, and by the way, Arij Abu Ali, thank you so much for introducing us. Awesome. Tech SEO Women is an awesome group. But today we have Veruska Anconitano. I totally butchered that. Veruska, welcome.
Hello, thank you guys for having me. Yeah, you did butcher a little bit, but not that much. So it could have been worse.
Before, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We should have practiced live for an hour, but it's fine. I mean, it could have been worse.
So tell us how to properly say your name.
So my name is Veruska, which is a Russian name. So it's so hard to pronounce that people call me Veru, Veru. It's easy. And my surname is even worse than my name. It's Italian because I'm Italian. It's Anconitano, so it's Anconitano, and basically it's Anconitano. So you don't change the A in E. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
It's one of those names. To pronounce
it in English, it's a specialty now.
Anconitano. There you go.
Correct.
I just have to say it with my hands, and that helps.
Exactly.
So we were talking a little bit about lineage before we jumped on, and I want to I would love to kind of get into this before we get into your background. So because you've got your name, which is very Russian sounding, and you've got your lineage, which I only deduced based on your Twitter handle. And then you have where you live, which is Ireland. So tell us about yourself in terms of your background and your lineage.
Yeah, so I'm 99.8% Italian according to my DNA test. So, but I moved from Italy to Ireland 11 years ago. But still, as you can may recall from my accent, I'm extremely still very Italian. So my English is not proper English yet after 11 years. But yeah, so I'm an Italian living abroad and working abroad. But
So
yeah, nothing special. Just my name, my Russian name is my dad's fault.
So yeah, I was gonna ask about that, and it's funny because at least here in the States, Italians love to be Irish, and Irish love to be Italian. So literally on things like St. Patrick's Day, everybody, including Italians, and my father-in-law is very Italian, loves to be Irish, but then the rest of the year he's very much into being Italian, and he's very proud of his Italian heritage. But then so your Twitter handle is La Cucina.
Yes.
What does that? I think I know what that means, but I'm sure you can probably tell me better what that means.
So my Twitter handle is La Cuochina, which is
Okay.
similar to La Cucina, but La Cucina means little chef in Italian, and there are two reasons why I chose that nickname 10, 11 years ago. The first one is because I'm Italian and I'm really into food. And I own a few projects, food travel related, so it was just like connected. And the second one is because I like to think of my job and my profession as like a chef. When you mix ingredients together to get a result. So this was like, I'm a little chef working with different elements to get results on something. And at the same time, it also express my love for food.
So
That's why.
So this is 2 weeks in a row that we've had guests with really interesting Twitter handles. And Jeff, you and I, by comparison, no matter what Jason Barnard thinks about how cool our names are, which they're not cool, our Twitter handles, which are just our names, are so much more boring than our last guest, Paul's, who was at Phyto, very well known kind of personal branding, and of course for Veruska's. And I knew by reading your Twitter handle, I'm no language expert, but I've seen enough Italian things through my father-in-law to know that I thought it was something about the kitchen. So I'm glad to know that it was not far off.
It was. It is
so
actually.
Before we get into the episode too, I've got a funny story. Speaking of lineage that I was relating. So as I've mentioned, my father-in-law, very much Italian, and his family, their last name is Picciano. The same, it's kind of name you say with your hands, right? Picciano. And my wife, when we got married, actually seriously considered asking me to, because my name is Stoops. It's very like Northern European. It's very German, boring. Nothing special about my last name. And her last name is clearly so much better than mine. But when you get married, the custom, whether people agree with it or not, is the woman tends to take the man's name. And I just had never really considered it. I never really thought that it would be a consideration. And we actually considered, before she ended up taking my name, doing it the other way around, because her last name was so much cooler than mine. But yes, she ended up taking my last name. And the funny thing about my father-in-law and his Italianness, I should say, is he took a DNA test and he found out that he actually was not very Italian. He found out that he was mostly Swedish, which was not what he expected. And he's even in Columbus. There's the Columbus Italian Club. He's huge in the Columbus Italian Club, and you would never, based on his last name, anticipate that he's not really that much Italian. And then I come along with my last name, which is not Italian at all, and I take the same DNA test, and it turns out I'm actually percentage-wise the same level of Italian as him, exactly the same. almost no difference. So that was a really, really funny observation. And he was like, all right, Jake, now you can get into the Columbus Italian Club. And I'm like, but with my last name, like, how can I get into the Columbus Italian Club with my last name? It just would never work. So
just add a couple more vowels.
yeah, just add a vowel onto the end of my name.
Yeah.
All right. Enough about heritage, Veruska. We are going to get into your background next, but first, we want to make sure that we talk about something that is very near and dear to our heart, and that is United Search. We've been kind of in an informal sponsorship relationship with them, and we've been kind of making sure that we talk about them every episode because we do believe that kind of their mission is very important. So, if you're a listener, so are you looking to break into the SEO conference speaking circuit, but not sure how? Are you feeling that you are not well represented within the current SEO speaking circuit and you want to change that? We at the Page 2 podcast would like to take the opportunity to let users know about United Search, a new organization and first of its kind SEO speaker accelerator dedicated to ending the implicit bias in SEO that keeps BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and women in the margins of our industry. Their credo is diverse SEO equals better SEO. United Search offers mentoring advice from people with real-world practical SEO experiences in order to give students the skills they need to be able to deliver an amazing presentation on any stage and the network they need to land gigs, all at no cost to the student. How does this work? It's actually pretty simple. United Search connects a cohort of the best pitches they can source with the top mentors in their subject matter. After working with their mentors to develop their talk, they will host a live stream event where students get to present to SEO experts and receive positive, constructive feedback. Graduates of this SEO accelerator will get the benefit of top-notch mentorship, public speaking training, a video reel, lots of positive feedback, as well as a foot in the door to help find and land speaking gigs and access to an amazing community of SEO professionals. What does this mean for our podcast? As a sponsor and advocate, we're committed to regularly showing stats that illustrate our commitment to diversity on this podcast, and we've made a pledge to diversify, meaning that 60% of our guests will come from underrepresented groups, including women, BIPOC, BAME, LGBTQIA+, as well as representation for people with disabilities and those who are 55+ and older. If this sounds of interest to you, visit unitedsearch.org to learn more about becoming a student or mentor, or visit them on Twitter at @search_united. That is a great organization. Very much kind of into their mission. And, you know, I'm really hoping that as we talk to different people within the industry, and now we're on episode 65, as our listeners kind of go back and look through kind of the roll call of the different SEOs that we've talked to. Not that I want to like pat ourselves on the back, that's not what it's about, but I do hope that they see that there are people out there that are really trying to commit to establishing a certain level of balance so that it's not all middle-aged white guys on every speaking panel or every podcast, or just the same recycled group of industry thought leaders that you kind of always see and that the industry has fallen into. So we're doing our best with our humble little podcast just to make sure that there's balance, that it's not the same old people, that we bring fresh perspectives, and that we bring balanced perspectives from all over the industry. Cool. All right, Veruska, so you're now on the hot seat. Yes. Let's talk about your background. How did you get into SEO and digital marketing?
So I started years ago. I've been in this industry for the past 21 years or so. I started when the web in Italy was basically at its primordial stage. Nobody knew anything about SEO. We didn't even know what search engine optimization was. So I was working with a big company, and we were just producing articles for the sake of doing it. And at a certain point, I ended up checking my articles and noticed that they were ranking at first places on Google. And I started questioning why this is happening. What's the story here? How is it even possible? And what possibilities can this bring in the future? And so I started to just, I got into this weird, what wasn't SEO at first, something just researching and try to find answers to question. And I started to figure out, well, there is a trick to get here, and there is a value if you can be in first or second position. So the first thing that I did was opening one of the first Italian digital magazines that I sold 10 years ago, 9 years ago. That was basically my gym. So the place where I did my training and where I experimenting getting paid for ranking first place, failure, and also a lot of successes. And from there, basically, I start my career from there. I work at Google as a quality rater. And then from there, basically, I started to work. So basically, I started mostly as a writer, as what we call today SEO writer, and then I moved into more project management position. And then when I moved to project management, I also say I think I have the skill to do something even more specific and something that very few people, at least in Europe, are still doing today, which is multilingual SEO. So basically, I started out of casualty, and just because it happens, because I was in the right place in the right moment.
So in kind of researching your background a little bit, it looks like you went to school for journalism. And I think at some point I would love to create an infographic that is basically a conglomeration of the most common jobs or fields of study before people became SEOs, because I would say the thing that is the most common thread outside of things like imposter syndrome that we talk about on an episode by episode basis, and why we think everybody's story is so interesting, is that nobody's story ever starts with, I intended to go into SEO, unless you're becoming an SEO now. If you've been in the industry for maybe more than 5 or 6 years, it's usually you got into SEO by accident. So you went to school for journalism, and I guess take us back to then. How did journalism land you towards digital marketing and getting into SEO?
It's easy. Shortage of job. So I couldn't find anything, and I had to pay my rent. I moved away from home when I was 18, and I intended to pay for my university. And then I didn't want to go to my parents and say, you have to pay because I'm studying. So, and I really wanted to write for a living. And then I just realized this is not going to work. I need to find something else. And between jobs, I just jumped into the world of content writing, online content writing that was just starting, and it paid well. It paid extremely well. So basically, I was dragged into the industry because my desire to become a writer, journalist wasn't going to be fulfilled because of shortage of jobs, which is a thing still today. Mm-hmm. And then money actually were the other factor, combined with the fact that I saw a potential in something that was actually evolving and something that I'm really into data. So I saw if I can back up these things with data, I think I can get something out of something that just happened. I can make a career out of it. But yeah, I definitely, because I didn't find a job.
It is really interesting. I feel like every journalism major that we've talked to, and it's now probably, I think 5 or 6 over the course of time, all of them, almost to a T, they fell into SEO and digital marketing because when they got out of college, there were no journalism jobs. And I would say a lot of them fall closer to the, at least I don't know if things collapsed there, but here around 2007, 2008, there was a big economic bubble that burst along with the housing market that took a lot of jobs with it, and journalism kind of being one of those industries that in journalism as an industry and newspapers and things like that, that have been historically based in print have been dying for a long time in favor of the, more of the online medium. So it's just an interesting observation that it seems like every journalism major, not that journalism is a bad major or anything like that, but of the ones that fell into SEO, it was primarily because when they got out, there was no jobs and people got to pay rent.
For someone who works at the New York Times, journalism's not dead.
No, it is not dead, but you're not selling.
There is a shift.
You're not selling as many physical papers as you were. And you'll notice, like, if you go onto most news websites these days, if you try to read an article, like, you get halfway down that article and up pops the paywall. And that's a very real thing to supplement the income that's being lost from the actual physical delivery of papers.
Right. And the idea behind it, a lot of it is like, physical papers are going away. And, I'm not giving away any of the back end stuff, is that New York Times knows this. Like, we've really focused on digital, and those companies that could change are changing, right? So we do have, we have more subscribers now digitally than we ever had at the paper, because New York Times was a New York based paper, but now we're a worldwide based, online digital asset for it. And we've really been switching a lot of the things that we've been doing. Normal, you think about the news, it's like, or at least papers, it was written, it's published. It's not really live, right? So we've really been focusing a lot on that live side of things. And then now we have so many more, instead of just doing digital content on the site, we also have been buying up podcasts and like have our own like top podcast. And we're hoping to buy us one day, no, but they just bought like Serial. And then, we've really focused a lot on a lot of the digital stuff, and they've now branched out to documentaries and things like that. So like the journalism's still there. It's just not your typical paper. And when you hear when I hear them say that, like if you just look at stock prices, like over the last 10 years, our stock just keeps going up. It's because we've found a way to switch things around. Now, not every newspaper can do that. Not every journalistic outfit can do it. But it was one that I've been lucky that I'm a part of now.
So, Veruska, what is it like being a Google quality rater? I don't think we've ever had anybody on that's been a quality rater before.
Yeah.
Stressing. But you have to imagine that I was very young. I'm not that young anymore, but I was very young and I wanted to learn. So when this opportunity came around, I couldn't say no, because it was Google. It was a booming industry and it gave me a lot of insights. But at that time, and I'm talking about possibly 15, 16 years ago, when Google was actually building Google News, I was on the team for Google News. It was a gigantic amount of work, because you had to rate something, but also apply some thoughts. There was just a little bit of artificial intelligence at that time. Now it's way more advanced, of course. So you really needed to apply your judgment, but also find the data to back up your choice. And it was, sometimes it was extremely hard, because you also have cultural constraints when you judge something. And that's something that our quality raters still today, I know people that now have progressed in their career, now work at Google or other companies. So you have to take your cultural prejudice away when you rate, but they are there. So I remember some queries for me were extremely hard, because my mind was not there. I couldn't accept certain things that I was supposed to accept. But it's been a huge help for my career. I understood a little bit better also how corporate places work, how to engage with corporate people, with a business, a big business, an expanding business. I think this has been, aside from my personal website, my personal stuff, has been one of the biggest experience of my career, in terms of how to handle the stress, how to handle the people, how to handle your mental constraints, and how to grow up from being just a person who writes and wants to do something to actually being someone that does that something.
So I guess the question is, because somewhere in the world, somewhere in our listener base, there's somebody out there. They may not be a Google quality rater. They may be doing a different job, or they may be at an agency where the agencies making them put in 70 hours a week, or any other thing. What did you learn, and how did you handle that stress that was coming at you at that time?
At first, it was extremely bad because I couldn't filter the information. So I just filled my mind with so many stuff that I remember for possibly the first 4 or 5 months, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not learning anything, and what should I do? And then that's where I started to process everything as a single project. And I enter into that project management type of mind that helped me prioritize things, and also get acquainted with the idea that a working day has 7, 8, 9 hours, and then you're done. You have to be done, because otherwise your mind never switch. So in terms of handling the stress, I remember the first 4 or 5 months were a nightmare. And then the more I get into this habit of working always on repetitive tasks, and also kind of saying, this is my project for today, I need to achieve this, and that, everything gets smoother. So it's like pretty much everything. When you start, you fear that you cannot complete it, or you are not able, and you are overwhelmed with information. And the more you start using the tools, you get used to the language, you get used to the people, and also you get used to your, let's say, boss or superiors. The more you get comfortable, and it becomes easy. I think unless you have huge problems with your working place, then it becomes easy and extremely pleasant, and then it's where you really learn.
Yeah,
and first months you don't learn anything.
I'm gonna drop a bit of advice here from the movie Frozen 2, because I've got young kids, so like these types of movies are my life, and it's also been my experience. Right, there can be stressful situations. If you work at an agency, if you do freelance, even in-house, stressful situations where a lot of work is being piled on top of you. And I can't remember, I think it's Anna who says, sometimes you just have to do the next right thing. And if you allow the endpoint sometimes if you allow yourself to focus on where you have to end up, sometimes you'll forget that, like, hey, if this endpoint is a really, really big goal, you can't get it all done in one day. You've got to take a lot of small steps along the way that equal this huge goal. And sometimes there are people that think like, oh my God, I've got to get this done, and I've got to get that done, and I got to get that done. And then they just spin their wheels worrying about all the big things they got to get done, and then they get nothing done. And one of the things that I've found comfort in is just breaking things up into small steps. What is the next right thing that I can do to make progress towards this bigger goal? And as I end every workday, some work days are harder than others. Some are easier than others. I always ask myself kind of a personal question, like, Jake, today when you finished work, or when you did whatever you did at home, did you push the ball forward a little bit? And if my answer to that question, it's a very simple question. My answer to that question is yes, I pushed the ball a little bit forward towards wherever I want to go, then that was a good day. If I have a day where I say, no, I didn't push that ball forward at all, then I know that, hey, I can't have another day like that. And for me, that's a very simple, easy measuring stick. As I've kind of dealt with stress throughout my career, and I'm hoping other people can kind of adapt that. So you've been a freelancer, and you've been a project manager for a long time. So I guess kind of bring us up to date, because we've been kind of focused very early on in your career. Once you stopped being kind of a Google quality rater, where did you go from there, and what has your career been like up until now?
So I moved straight to management after that. So I kept having, and I still have, my own projects that are heavily SEO and digital marketing based. But then, Italy is a very small place, and I speak multiple languages. So once your name gets out, it gets out. And it's a matter of fact. I mean, it is what it is. So I get quite a lot of offer to start directly to work and manage projects. So I jump and manage a huge editorial project, SEO based editorial project for a publisher that was going that wanted to break in Italy, in UK and Spain and France. And I was in charge of managing the whole SEO stuff, the writers, the strategy, everything. From there, it was just one after another. At a point that when I moved to Ireland, I worked with a couple of travel companies. Travel is one of my other passions. So whenever I can work with travel and food, I'm extremely happy because, that's the best thing in life. And then I had another offer when I was working in one of these companies, always as a consultant. I've never been an employee, whether a contractor or a in-house freelancer, but never been an employee. So I've never. It's not in my mind. I went to Groupon. So they were expanding into Europe, and they are an American company, and they were completely American focused on everything, and they needed someone that helped them to culturalize their approach using SEO. So I took charge at first Italy, and then I got Spain, France, UK, pretty much the whole EMEA market, and launched projects that were replicated also to the US because they were successful. And yeah, it's basically one after another. And I'm now in that phase where I'm working for a long time with same companies. And I get other projects as well. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's been kind of steady. As soon as I started to realize where my skills were, and also how to develop further my skills, my multilingual SEO skills, it's just like happened. So it's a mix of, again, being at the right time in the right moment, but also having the skills that certain markets and certain industries needed and still needs.
Yeah, excellent. So we're going to move into multilingual SEO with a content strategy and cultural twist here in just a second. So if you're listening to to this episode and that's kind of what you're here for, make sure you listen to kind of the middle segment, and the Twitter questions are filled with lots of multilingual questions as well. But before we get into that, of course, I want to ask, we talk a lot about agency, we talk a lot about in-house, and we do have some consultants, but it's mostly you're either at an agency or you're in-house somewhere. So we always like to ask the folks that have been kind of out on their own as independent consultants, kind of what do you see as the pros and cons of being a consultant as opposed to being an employee somewhere?
Well, the first is the obvious one. You are an employee, you start at 9, you finish at 6, that's it. Your day is done. When you are a consultant, you are basically to take care of your clients, and you have to find new ones. You have to have a backup. And if you reach to a point where you have multiple clients, you may also need to scale your kind of small business. So you need to be sure that you have a backup, other colleagues that you trust that can help you if you need some help, even last minute. So it's more networking than just work when you are an employee or working for an agency. Definitely one of the cons, it can be not being involved as much as you should be and as you can be if you are a full-time employee. Because you are always an external person that you have to work towards goals. So the company expects you to bring results and working towards goals and sometimes you feel disconnected. You can feel disconnected if there's not that strong culture, business culture where you feel everybody feels included. And this can be a huge downside especially if you are new to the industry, it can put you like, okay, I'm not ready to do this because I don't know what's happening in reality. I'm doing this, but I don't know what other teams are doing. But for me, it's just pros, to be completely honest. Either I've been extremely lucky with clients and projects, or it's just because I'm used to it. But for me, having the freedom to adjust my schedule, and also to sometimes if I have to work late, it's fine. I've chosen this lifestyle. It gives me what I need. And sometimes I think that what would happen if I was only working for one client. I'm sure that, I don't know, I may be annoyed, bored. I don't know. Yeah.
I think there are pros and cons. I think I, for one, fit better within agency because it gives me enough variety and there's just enough happening that I seem to like it. But I don't have the guts or the entrepreneurial spirit to go out on my own. And I've been in-house, and you're right. There is some comfort in working on the same thing every single day. But as an SEO, I found that like I got also very bored really quickly. Jeff, what are, now that you've been in-house for a while for the first time in your career, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I was, one of my biggest concerns was that I was going to get bored of like working on one website. Only been there 6 months or 7 months now, so I can't really say I've been bored. And
are you bored yet, Jeff?
I am not. One of the great things about it is that I get to spend way more time on things where it's where I can get deeper and deeper and actually have that feedback cycle with people in engineering or on the team where I'm building up strategies, and usually on the agency side, you write them up as great as you can, hand them off. Hopefully some people on the other side are doing and implementing. Now, like I'm part of those conversations. So not only am I doing that, I'm inside of Jira. I have access to GitHub. I'm not putting any code in there, but I can look at the code and actually pull stuff out and say, hey, this is where we're going. And I have a plan. Like we have a plan for this whole year. I never get to do that in an agency side. So it is, right now it helps when your website's getting, millions and millions of visits a month. Small things matter. So, where before I'd be like, oh, that doesn't matter because it's like, that's only going to give us like a 5% boost. Right now, a 5% boost could be, 15 million visitors.
Make your whole year.
Exactly. So we are looking for those type of numbers now. So that is an interesting aspect. So I think if it was like a small little site, I think I would probably get bored. But if it was smaller, I'd probably have more control too. So I think it's give and take on any of those. But one thing about any agency, like if there was any lull, it's filled with other clients not having a lull. So so that's where I think that think you're going to get bored type of things is that. So you do make your time. I get to play around and code a lot more. I get to do some more development. So things that I wasn't able to do when I was in the agency. But at the same time, I'm like, sometimes you do got to sit back and find those, like, where can I be putting myself? I have this extra time. If I'm not applying that time, then I feel like, I've been through one layoff this last year. Don't ever want to have that happen again. So, I'm always filling in any of those little holes that I've been through. And and I'm always imagining the consultant side of things too, is people coming to you with work all the time, like how you said, like you build a name up and a reputation, and I've just seen a lot of consultants try to take on too much. So finding that balance on your side, I think has got to be tough. Like, how do you find that balance of actually getting that work done and actually having a life? Because if it was me, I could be sitting there till midnight just writing up recommendations and code and things like that. So Jake, when you ask me where I find time for all these hobbies, like I force the hobbies on me so that I'm not sitting here all day, all night doing SEO.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know how you guys how I would be the same way. where if I didn't have like a guardrails on myself, I could.
Yeah.
It's it's just it's a passion. I think we're
Yep.
all lucky enough to have a job that we're passionate about, and not everybody is that lucky. So got to put some guardrails on it for sure.
Yep.
Last question before we jump into the multilingual, and I like to ask this because this is about the real life, what SEOs go through. So Veruska, like in your career, what have been kind of your best and worst SEO related experiences?
Hard question, to be honest. So my best experience, it's been possibly bringing more results than what I was planning to. So, usually when you start a project, you need to scope it out and say, okay, by third month, I'm going to bring you this, but there must be also these other consequences. And in that specific case that happened actually a couple of years ago, I underestimated everything because I didn't put much effort. I said, no, this industry is way too difficult and there are too many competitors. And then either I was lucky or I was just like, I found the key to penetrate exactly what the company wanted to achieve, to get exactly what the company wanted to achieve within SEO. And I did a few tweaks here and there on the website, worked on the content side, and got amazing results. One of the worst experience was actually getting a bad penalization because I didn't realize that I was actually filling the website with keywords. So I over optimized the content in a way that I was actually thinking, no, that's fine. Nothing happens. When you just overcomplicate things. And I overcomplicated things both for search engine and for people. So, and where I learned the biggest lesson possibly that it's human first and search engine then. And UX is part of SEO if it's not SEO. It was a huge lesson. I didn't lose the client because I didn't. But I actually had to fix the situation and mostly make sure that it wouldn't happen again to them and to me and to other clients as well. Yeah, I'm still shocked when I talk about this thing because
when that happens, how do you go to the client and communicate that? Like that's got to be excruciating.
Yes, I'm actually. This is a good and a bad thing. I have no problem in being responsible and accountable, even for good and for worse. So as soon as I realized I screwed up, guys. So I made this, and this, and that's why we are having this situation. There are ways to fix this. It takes time. So you can fire me and find someone else, or you can just say, okay, let's see what happens. If I can recover or at least bring things as they were, we are all happy, and then we can move forward with me or without me. If I can't, up to you. Of course, you have the right to fire me and just say, no, you are not the right person. But yeah, I didn't polish because there was nothing to polish in reality. Yeah. It was very bad. Yeah. So what can you say? It was like, no, it's not my fault. It's someone else.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Good for you for owning that, and good for the client for having a little bit of empathy, because SEO is not always an easy job. It's not like paid search where it's a clean in, clean out, clean result sort of exercise. There's a lot of gray area, and not only that, because things change all the time, there's a lot of testing involved with how far you can push the boundaries, which is why there's been many different colors of hats over the years that people can wear. And even people with good intentions, sometimes it leads to not great outcomes when you push the boundaries a little bit too far. But good for you for owning it, because I've been a part of organizations, or I've seen people in the past where it's more about crafting the story to make yourself look good than the actual story, than actually what's happening. And the deeper I've got into my career, I feel like the less comfortable I am with that sort of an approach, to the point of like, I won't do that anymore. Even if it means making myself look bad, just from an ethical standpoint. So good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, I think the more you age, with age and experience, you want to handle this thing. When you are younger, you're scared, what should I do now? But the more you grow, the more you really feel the need to own also the mistakes and the failures.
So Jeff, let's move into the core topic, which is multilingual SEO and content strategy with a cultural twist.
Yeah, no, it's funny. So I've worked on a lot of international websites myself, but never multilingual. Well, if they were, I didn't handle the not knowing any other language besides English, and I barely know that language. I haven't really worked a lot in the multilingual kind of SEO world. So what are some of the most or more important aspects of multilingual? And I'm coming from it as like from a content side, right? Not even looking at the technical side, but looking at the content side. Like, what are some of the most important aspects?
It's usually, and always, not usually actually, always understanding the cultural landscape that you want to enter. And I have a funny story, which is not really funny. It's usually what happens. People think that, for example, Spain and Mexico are thinking the same way, use the same words because they speak Spanish. It's not true at all. Spain speaks Spanish, Mexico speaks Spanish, but they use wording in different ways. Their cultural landscape is completely different one from another. So when you have to enter the Spain market, you cannot use the same approach from a content standpoint that you would use if you are already in Mexico. And that's the biggest thing for me. But I wouldn't actually say that the technical aspect is not important in this case. It is equally important because it determines the efforts that you put in producing content, in getting a good ranking, getting links, pretty much everything. So I would say in terms of content, it's certainly understanding the cultural landscape that you want to enter, but backing it up with a good structure, or at least a clear structure, not necessarily good, but a clear one that allows you to really stay focused.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it more in kind of the Mexico and Spain. They're two separate countries, not companies, two separate countries. But how about like a country like India, right? It's one country, but with like multiple, and I from what I gather, there's like 80 or 90 like variations of languages inside of there. But it's like one country, right? So it's like a .in domain. Like how would you handle something like that where there could be like, I'm sure, and I know China's the same way, where there's multiple versions of languages because the countries are so big and have so many people. So what are some of the aspects there?
And I would also add even same language, different dialects or
Dialects, yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. And in this specific case, Italy is the same. We have one language and multiple dialects. It's a little bit, of course, less complicated than India or China, but in this specific case, you target the main language. Because unless you are extremely local and you want to go local, but extremely local, like you're a local business, there's no need to go in depth, because even if you have dialects, people on that level where they use the web to search and to do stuff, they know the main language. So they know Chinese, and then they know Indian. And then you have also to understand that from a cultural standpoint, Chinese people have also a specific mindset regardless of their region or their dialect. They may have a different dialect, a different food, but the habits, the user habits are the same. So the easiest way is to, unless you go extremely local because you are a local business, but possibly you don't need international localization because you are local, the main language serves the entire country. Otherwise, you will overcomplicate things.
So how do approaches differ from different cultures to different cultures?
Yeah, it is kind of a thoughtful process that the first thing to do is that really knowing the culture. So, for example, in my specific case, I happen to work with multiple countries, but sometimes I don't know the countries. Like, for example, when it's Japan or Korea, even if I'm extremely passionate, there are things that I don't know because it's completely different from me. So the first thing that I do is I search for local people, local experts, because I want to have a grasp on what really search is in there, what's also especially the user habits when they search for something. And that's possibly the first step that a lot of companies completely miss. So if you want to localize in another language, you need to have local people or people that have an in-depth knowledge of the culture, because too often the process is I have the English version or I have the French version or the Italian version and I want to go to another market. What I do, I just translate the keywords and that's it. Sometimes it can work, like sometimes, for example, Italy and Spain are quite similar in terms of user habits, markets, industries, and it may work, but you will never move from a point where you are just providing a basic service to the next level. Mm-hmm. So having the help of locals is crucial at the first stage when you start planning your multilingual SEO strategy, because otherwise you miss a lot of things, and then you have to repair the damage and spend way more time fixing things. And that's the biggest thing for me. And another thing that it's always and almost always underlooked is seasonal trends. What's seasonal in one part of the world is not seasonal in another part of the world, and that shapes your keyword research and your content. And sometimes it gives especially in regards to e-commerces, that's something that I work a lot with e-commerces. It shapes your strategy, not just the SEO strategy. It shapes your product team strategy, your project team, your PPC, CRM, pretty much everybody. And everything starts from search, because search can give direction to every other teams within a specific market. So I would say seasonal trends are underlooked, but are extremely important in planning a good content strategy, a good multilingual content strategy. And then another thing that I always put into my equation is backing up SEO data with other sources. It can be social media, it can be PPC, it can be just a mere observation of the landscape. What's the most taught topics and why? Is there a correlation why something becomes popular? And then really deep dive into conversation rather than just see, okay, in May, people in Italy are looking for this, so let's produce content for this. It's way more. You can use, we should use always data from other sources to back up our SEO choices, because it can give you good insights.
Yeah.
I don't know if it answers more or less the question.
Yeah, no, definitely. This is all great. Like the most I've really done with, anything multilingual is like I use translation services, right? So and these services say that they are like, they have people on the ground in those locations and they're writing, they and I have to take their word for it many times. For the most part, like those companies that I'll work with were US based. So those other countries, they didn't care as much, right? They just wanted they had a German office, so they needed German, written content. So I would use a company, since I couldn't use, a different company in each country. Like you get a translation service company, and hoping that they're just not running it through Google Translate, and that they are doing what they're saying. But at the same time, like when you work with kind of those other countries where you're doing content strategies in there, how close to the ground are you using with people there? Like, or are you using like a service that would help translate that there? Or, if you need something written in German, are you working with a German company to have that written?
Ideally, I work with real people, not agencies, unless
Yeah.
with many countries, I work with agencies that I know, that are local. Never big agencies that are, I don't know, located in Germany and then provide services in Chinese, Korean, Japanese, whatever, French. Because I always have a feeling that it's like a content farm, translation content farm. And it's hard. Sometimes I did work with one of those, I think last year, because one of my clients already had a contract in place. So it's let's try and see what happens. And what happened was that when the content came, I had a look and I felt something was not good, was not right. There was something that wasn't right. So I just said, let's pass this content to our person and let's see if this person thinks that they are good or they are not good. And the results was terrible because we had to rework the content. So sometimes, of course, these kind of agencies allow you to spend less, but you spend less and you get less. The majority of the time, it's not always like this. But most of the cases, you spend less, you get less, or you have to spend more on a later stage to review the content and to just even tweak here and there. So my approach is always go local. If I don't have resources myself, I have a network of agencies that I can contact that are local, pretty local, pure local.
That's good. I think having that network and you specializing in it would be great. So now I know I have someone that I can go to when I run into anything that I need internationally done.
My pleasure. Well, it's the New York Times, so I mean,
right. Yeah, exactly.
So I've been a part of some engagements with clients who have content in multiple languages or for multiple regions or both. And one of the problems that I see most commonly occurring that causes a lot of cannibalization in non-US search engines would be that they create pages that are supposed to be alternative language or alternative region, and they don't bother to translate those pages. As somebody who comes at this often from a non-English perspective, how bad is that? And quite honestly, one of my things is, like, if I were a non-English user, I would be a little offended by that if I came to a page expecting it to be in my language of choice and then it's just all English. So how bad is that? How bad is that?
I think this is another case where it is partially SEO, but it's mostly UX. So the primary goal of a company is to solve a problem or provide an answer. So in this case, you basically are failing in these two main things that are the main drivers for people to reach out to you, whether because they are looking for a product to solve a problem or an answer again to solve a problem. So it's mostly it's the bounce rate, it's not ranking, and we all know all these things, but it's also branding, reputation, and offering a very bad user experience that then reflect on the perception that people have on your brand, about your brand. So it's something that can escalate quickly.
Yeah, I had a situation where, and this happened in the UK, where a client had a UK version of the site, and there was really no delineation between the US English version and the UK English version. And in Google UK, the US version was ranking when they wanted the UK version to be ranking, because the UK version ranking had the local currency. And when I tried to figure out, okay, like what's going on here, my obvious first thing and their obvious first thing was, hey, the hreflang tags are all messed up. And I looked at those and I was like, they're actually set up perfectly. and I plugged the pages in question into Google Search Console, and the response was, this page is a duplicate of another page, and here's the duplicate, and it was the US page. And I said, this isn't a technical issue. This is because you haven't translated it, or you haven't put the UK version of the page into the local dialect. And so, like, maybe you need to think about that, or maybe you just need to not have 10 different English versions of the page, because Google sees them all as the same. So pretty interesting. And that's coming, and this leads into one of my next questions. I get into situations at an agency where a lot of times we start and it's US based strategy out. And there are times where they say, Jake, can you help me with my international strategy? And I say, sure, but I'm not as good as somebody that's in market. And, I try to make my way, but it's impossible for any one person to know all the languages or how all of the different versions of Google or other search engines are working out. So, like, as somebody from the outside looking in, if you're a person like me that sometimes gets stuck awkwardly trying to fit into the role of international strategist, what do you recommend somebody like me does about that?
So my first recommendation would be to make a list of the things you have to do. So replicate the things that you have done for the US version, and then estimate the time you need to do each of these things in another language. Present the list to your boss with the cost for each action, because you need to spend time, because you are not an expert, so they have to pay you more. Because
right.
And you have to take time off other clients. And as soon as you put a cost beside every single item, your boss will change your mind. But aside from this, which is kind of extremely, it's a different kind of recommendation. I would say the first thing to do is basically, again, do a list with all the things that you have done for the US version, and put in place at least the technical structure, because it's the foundation of everything. Once you have this, it's common, and it's also a good practice if you are not on the market and you have no help, is to take the list of the keywords that you rank for the US version and see if they can somehow be adapted to the other language by using a translator, by using a tool. It's not accurate, but it's a way to start out. And at least you can find there's always something that it's a common ground between languages, something that replicates over and over, some topics, some ideas, some keywords. There's always something that replicates, even that is a small win. And then, of course, like in a case, I had to redo the taxonomy for an entire e-commerce starting from the US one. And there was categories, unexisting categories for us in Europe. So in that specific case, I couldn't replicate the same. I couldn't even use the list, but it's another problem. When you have at least a few keywords that you can focus on, I would say try to find the common ground between languages. It's not easy. It is not easy at all, but it helps you start. But it's not easy.
No.
But at least, yeah.
I do like the idea of going to my client and asking them for them to send me to 9 different countries so that I can take a vacation to learn about the culture. I do like that. I don't think they're going to pay for it, but I do like that.
Yeah, it's a good idea, actually.
Right. Yes, that's the best way to learn. I should just go there. All right. So why don't we move? Well, before we move into the Twitter questions of the week, do we have any kind of closing thoughts on multilingual international SEO? Actually, some of the Twitter questions are somewhat overlap, but any kind of semi-closing thoughts, I should say.
No, from my side, I think this is an issue, multilingual SEO, multilingual content, that it's raising, especially in the past couple of years, with this diversity discussion going around everywhere, the needs for customization, for a better user experience. So I would say, if there's any company out there listening, do not underestimate the effort that you need, but also the results that you can have if you want to enter a different market. It's not something that you do in one day, but strategizing in the best way allows you to give results also by betting on very few elements of your website. It's not always necessary to redo a website from zero. Sometimes it's just some tweaks, some technical adjustments, some extremely focused content just are sufficient to succeed. And then you can escalate.
Absolutely. But how would SEOs stay in business if there wasn't websites to redo and replatform every couple of months?
That's true.
It's called job security.
That you start small and then you become essential to the companies, and
Right.
they say, see, these are the results, but we can do better.
Can't
so
get
why
rid
don't
of
we
me.
do this?
Let's do another redesign. All right, so let's move into Twitter questions of the week. And this week we have a very special gift straight from Jeff's laser. We've got some custom Page 2 podcast coasters. So the winner of the Twitter question of the week is going to get. Jeff, how many coasters are they going to get? You're the one producing this, so I'm not gonna.
It'll be a 4-pack.
Okay, I was gonna say I'm not gonna sign you up for a specific number before I know what the actual capability is.
Yeah, no, I mean I could do a bunch, but yeah, I think 4-pack's good. I don't know if people need like 25 coasters. So
yeah, what are you going to do with 25 coasters? Yeah, I think 4 is probably sufficient for around the house. So the best question, as chosen not by myself or Jeff, but as chosen by Veruska, will get the coasters. So let's jump on in. So the first question comes from Korean Komarek, and again, I'm going to apologize if I butchered your name. I actually think I got pretty close, but it's at Korean Komarek on Twitter. And this question is, please define a food travel strategist. I love food and travel. Thanks.
We all do.
Yes.
So I used to define myself when I do food travel strategist as someone that pretends to work, but in reality just travel and eats. So I'm lucky enough to basically help tourism boards, hotels, companies in putting in place strategies for their food tourism activities. Whether it's tour, whether it's mostly landing pages, content, and basically launch new products within the SEO landmark. But food travel strategies can include a lot of different things, and not just SEO. Can include someone doing, for example, influencer marketing, someone else doing PPC, someone else doing local marketing, because we sometimes forget that SEO is also local, extremely local. And in these specific cases, it can become powerful tool. So what I do, it's mostly based around content and optimization and creating strategies on a long-term way. But a strategist in this field can do a plethora of other things.
So I have a follow-up question to that. So when you actually, and first off, I should say, like, we probably could have just done a full episode on just food and just travel.
Yes.
I would say Italy and it's just Italian heritage as a culture. I don't know if it's more frequently than other cultures, because there are other cultures that have amazing food. But I feel like being an Italian, one of the things that you ultimately often come back to is food, maybe more so than other cultures that I've experienced. So it's very, very much a culture based in food, and I love it. So we probably could have talked for an entire episode just about Italian food.
Exactly.
And travel. Yeah, that would, oh my goodness. Yeah, there's so many places, especially recently, that we've not been able to travel to that I would love to talk about. But when you're kind of engaging that aspect of your offering or those skill sets, what types of companies come to you? Is it food companies? Is it like mom and pop restaurants? Is it national restaurants? Is it travel or food bloggers? Like, who do you most often work with?
I work with tourism boards,
okay,
hotels, but also big companies offering tours and stuff like that. In this field, I never work with. I tend not to work with smallest companies it never happened. And I am focused on the big, not big names, but big companies or organizations and stuff like this.
Okay, interesting.
But there's a market out there also for smallest and more local companies.
It was none of the above, option other. Okay.
Exactly.
Interesting. All right. So our next question, our next couple of questions come from the search discovery team. Search discovery coming strong with the questions. So this one's
whipped them into shape.
Yes, I did. I held them under penalty of death. You need to bring amazing questions, and they do a great job. They bring really good questions every week that kind of contribute to the discussion. So search discovery people, if you like to hear me drone on and you're still listening, I thank you. So this next question comes from Chris Venkara, who is not actually on Twitter, but he still brought the thunder with a 4-part question. I don't know if we'll get to all 4 parts. So what are your thoughts on separate domains versus having alternative language folder structure for multilingual?
For me, it's not one or another. It depends by your resources, your budget, the time you want to spend. Of course, if you have a country code top level domain, you have more chances to reach local people. But again, it's really, you need to find a balance. We are not always working with Amazon that can have the privilege of having a country code top level domain. So sometimes, very often for smallest companies, folders is possibly the best choice in terms of effort, money spent, and revenues. I don't think there's one that's best compared to another. It's a personal, business choice.
And I'll do a follow-up to that because I think this is an interesting topic that I've delved into over my time. Are you a proponent of not just having folders for a language, but also folders for specific regions and having them both combined together?
Yes. Yes, in order to reach more customized and more local people that you can, and also beat competitors, especially if you are in a very competitive niche. The more, it's like skills, the more you specialize, the better you are. It's basically the same principle applies. So if you cannot go for the top level domain, the more you get in depth with the folders, the better it is. For me, at least, in my experience.
And then a follow-up question also from Chris that and I'm surprised we didn't quite touch on this earlier, but I'm glad we're touching on it now. Search engine considerations in places where Google either is not the dominant search engine or Google, the version of Google that exists in the country is not as advanced as Google US.
Yeah. This is a topic that I very often ask, a question that I very often ask myself, and there's no answer, because basically you have Google, and then for the, let's say, English-speaking countries, you have Yahoo still, you have Bing, but then you enter a whole different world when you go on Baidu or Yandex or extremely localized search engines, where you not only have to rethink your overall digital marketing strategy and SEO strategy, you really need to know the culture. So it's hard to say what to use if you want to go to a different market if Google is not available, because it's not a question of what you can use, what you should use. It's a question of what you can use at its best to get results. And it's for certain market, also for Russia, Yandex doesn't work like Google. It mimics the Google, but the logic behind Yandex is completely different. So you think, okay, it works in the same way because basically it used the same tagging system, but then you put in place a structure that in reality it's filtered in a different way because it's a different logic. So I think we are not at that stage unless we are locals. I mean, if there was an Italian search engine, possibly I would know everything about it because it's my main language. But unless you are extremely local, other search engines at this stage are extremely hard to understand. So I would say Google, I wouldn't estimate Bing, to be honest. Not in terms of reach, but in terms of results, because you get possibly less people using it, but more interested people that are actually using it for a purpose and that may convert better for your product, your landing page, your service, because there is less competition. So I had a discussion a few months ago with somebody that just said to me, I use Bing because there's less noise. So we should take advantage of the less noise part and make sure that we rank there as well if we want to use a different search engine. But at this stage, I still think that Google takes the majority of the pie, and it's normal.
Yeah, until someday when they get broken up as a monopoly.
Exactly.
All right, next question comes from new SDI team member and former Page 2 podcast alum. Fun fact, so this next question comes from Angela Bergman. I actually interviewed Angela way back at the beginning of season 2 when she worked for another company, and she recently joined us at Search Discovery, and we connected. There was like not much connection between those two occurrences, other than as she was interviewing, it was really great for all the other Search Discovery people that did not know her to be able to go and listen to her on the episode to say like, yeah, actually she gets it. So she's been awesome so far, but she is at Radkitten on Twitter. So her question is, are there UX differences across countries and cultures? And if so, what are the potential roadblocks?
There are, and sometimes we don't even notice the differences anymore because we are used to it. So the first one that comes to my mind is how you guys in the US write dates and numbers compared to how in Europe writes dates and number. And it's one of the biggest differences, and it's also one of the biggest mistakes that you see when companies or individuals localize a website. They completely forget this. It's like something that slips out of people's mind, but it's confusing for us because it's just something that we are not used to. And the same goes for example, in India, they write, I think, money or stuff with money in a completely different way compared to every other country in the world. And so these are possibly the two biggest differences. There's also a difference in how people search. So, for example, people in Asia search from right to left, or from Japanese search vertically. And even if you don't go in depth with localization, you need to take in consideration the fact that sometimes Japanese people just search vertically. So you may adapt your layout for their needs. But yeah, there is a big difference, and that's part of what someone working in this multilingual industry should assess as well, because once again, I repeat this over and over, and sorry, I sound like a broken record, but it's all about the user experience. So you don't convert if you don't provide a good user experience, and UX is fundamental. So I think there are differences. These are just the biggest one that comes to my mind, just thinking out loud, but there are others for sure.
Yeah, and
America.
Colors.
To say America loves to switch numbers around. Like I don't get our date process because it makes so much more sense to start with the year, month, and day than it does to start with month, day, year. Just for sorting, if you try to do it in Excel, right? You have to build logic to do it. It's same with the metric system. Like I use the metric system more than the average American, so it's
okay.
I measure everything in grams and liters, and I also I also like doing things with lasers and 3D printers. Everything's in millimeters, so it just makes more sense. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, we're the only country in the world, I think, that uses Fahrenheit when the rest of the world uses Celsius. It's Stupid.
Oh yeah, that's another one actually. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And then I will say one that I ran into most recently for a multilingual website when writing structured data. When you're doing something like postal address, the markup from schema.org is very English US centric. And I was trying to write structured data for an address from, I believe the address was maybe Iran or someplace in the Middle East. They don't have zip codes. They don't have anything. No, it was Dubai, not Iran. Probably difference. But yes, they don't have zip codes. So like that's a required field, but they don't have zip codes. So what do you put? And I ran into that, and I was like, well, I guess my work's done for the day. Can't actually do that. So interesting. So
yeah, it's like when you work with food with recipes, it's the same thing. The
yeah.
schema markup is based on the US system, and then it's easier to adapt compared to the postal code.
Yeah, that was a weird one where I truly did not know what to do about that other than leave it blank. Our fourth question, so we got two more questions. Our fourth question comes from Wade Saunders, another SDI stalwart at Heels Four Corners on Twitter. His question is, have you ever seen a situation where hreflang sitemaps work better than hreflang tags?
Never personally. Never seen a situation. I think it depends by the implementation. I personally have never seen a difference in ranking or performances. Once again, it's like the structure. You choose what it's most functional for your website. Test, A/B test everything, and see what happens. Sitemaps are possibly a longest process, but save time on the long run, while the tags can be a little bit daunting if you have ever changed pages, add pages, and you have nothing automatically in place. But in terms of what performs better, I've never seen a huge difference, to be honest. Actually, I would love to have someone tell me I had this experience, so this worked better than this, and these are the reason why.
Yeah, every time I've had that question from a developer, it's always been, well, which one's easier for you to implement?
Exactly.
Yeah. Last question comes from our former SDI colleague, Mr. Zach Chahalis, at Zach Chahalis on Twitter. When it comes to hreflang, how often do you see sites using X default, and is that worth accounting for? That's a very technical question.
I hope not. I hope that it's not worth accounting anymore for anybody in the world, because it's so awkward. I mean, it's one of those things that adds a layer of something that's very unnecessary to get through for users and for developers. So I was working, actually, this is funny because I was working on this big website before the pandemic came, and they had this structure, this basically the X default tag in place. So you landed on what was the secondary homepage, let's call it like this, it's not the right word. And then you had a menu where you could choose your country. And it was so weird because why you are sending me to this page when you know exactly where I'm coming from? I want to go directly to the landing page I'm interested in. So in my opinion, is not, please get rid of this as soon as you can. It's just unnecessary. It's a step more, a layer, complicate things, and it's not user friendly once again. And it's another line of code that we don't need.
When I'm identifying hreflang issues, one of the most common is does not include X default. All right, so let's pick a winner of these Page 2 podcast coasters. So question number one was Korean food travel strategist. Question number two was from Chris on separate domains in folder structure and Google not being the dominant search engine. Question number three was from Angela on UX differences across countries and cultures. Question number four was Wade on hreflang tags versus sitemaps. And Zach's question was around hreflang, the X default attribute.
I will go with Angela and the UX question, because it actually was, it's so interesting that I now want to dig deep in this, because it was just something that, yeah, I didn't expect. I was expecting something more technical, like the other questions, but not something more like cultural related. So yeah, I would go for that question.
All right. So Angela is the new winner of some brand new Page 2 podcast lasered coasters. And we will be reaching out to you to send those coasters your way. So Jeff, why don't you take us home? Let's finish up the episode.
Sure. So this is one question we love to ask all our guests. And what words of advice would you give to a person that's just getting into SEO?
Two advice. The first one, if you are starting out, is to take every advice, article, recommendation out there with a pinch of salt, and learn as soon as you can to choose your sources accurately. Because even if it ranks first in Google, or if you see everywhere on social media, it doesn't mean that it's giving you good advice. So take everything that you read with a pinch, more than a pinch of salt, and start experimenting. And the second one, possibly the one that I always tell also when I teach SEO to people, is become specialized in something. The more specialized skills you have today, the better it is, because SEO is such a broad topic, a broad industry that can be split in multiple different small industries and small topics. So I actually vouch for becoming highly specialized. The more you can, and the sooner the better.
As a foodie, what type of salt would you pinch?
Throw it over your shoulder too.
Is there a specific salt you like?
No, not specifically.
I sat on a meeting with the New York Times cooking team, or people on the cooking team, and they spent 30 minutes talking about different types of salt they use. And I was like, I need to start ordering more salt, because I have salt.
I like to cook with kosher salt. There's a big difference between regular salt. And I know that that's probably not, like, I'm sure that your New York Times cooking team has much better salt than just regular salt and kosher salt. But I like to cook with that. And I like the thickness of the kosher salt. So like if you ever eat, for example, edamame, you don't just put regular, you put kosher salt on top of the edamame. And I would also say I liked seasoned salt as well to go with my salad. So yeah, always pretty good. So Veruska, where can people find you?
So you can find me pretty much everywhere on social media and on my personal website, which is pretty hard to pronounce because it's my surname. So it's www.anconitano.com. And if you are into food and travel, you can also read me and our articles on thefoodlers.com. And yeah, basically, but if you look for my name, I'm pretty much everywhere, blubbering on every social media out there. Now I'm really into Clubhouse because I need to know what all this thing about.
And also La Cucina on Twitter. Twitter. All right. Yes. So thank you so much for coming on. This was a really great discussion. Multilingual and international is not a topic we get into very often, and also the coming at it from a freelance and a consultant angle is not something that we get as often. So very, very excited to have talked to you, and thank you so much for coming on. And it is very late on a Friday night. So we do appreciate you staying on late and spending your Friday night with us. For our listeners, by now we record on Fridays and then we release our episode. If my editing is quick, on Mondays, sometimes it's been Tuesdays, Wednesdays, but I do my best. We do turn our editing around quickly. So if you're listening to this episode next week, have a great week, and we'll see you next week with another great episode.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me, and have a nice day.